Hey there. So, I want to talk about the trickster energy. And I feel like the trickster is this archetype that, some people can be scared of it, intimidated by it. it it's some people kind of villainize it and things like that. I've been studying trickster energy for a while. I have been fascinated by it, and the ultimate trickster is like Loki, you know? And I love Loki. Like, I think Loki is fascinating, funny, because in a way, it's like there's this duality to it because, the trickster can both trap you and also, like, keep you in the element of surprise. And if you think about being trapped, it's a consistent state. It means kind of stuck and not moving, and which indicates that you would likely be able to predict what was happening, right? If you were stuck and imprisoned. But with Loki, it's both things, and very obviously and prominently. You know, in actuality, with all things, it's both things. But with Loki in particular, I was just always fascinated by it and couldn't really like fully grasp it for a long time. Um, had gone through times in the past feeling intimidated by it, fascinated by it, um, just also guided by spirit to really look at it and study it. So I think for a segment of time in my life, I sort of did demonize it because, like, I wouldn't allow it for myself, right? Like, I devoted myself to being very honest, and anytime that I wasn't being authentic, it was totally out of my consciousness. Like, I wasn't aware that I was in a coping mechanism or a defensive posture or anything like that whenever I was being inauthentic. So there was never any intentional deception that I would participate in. Like, never, because I didn't like it. I didn't how it felt to be deceptive to someone else. So there was this like want to be transparent and not to be tricky. And that's how I was living my life and stuff. But at the same time, because I was holding the idea of trickster in that way in my mind as like something I was not, what we resist persists. So I was often, a lot of times, being faced with the trickster outside of myself. So because I didn't own my ability to be trickster, I only saw it outside of myself, right? Because I denied it in myself, my ability to be trickster. And I mean, I could never just be trickster, right? Like it's just an archetype. So as humans, we have access to all archetypes. Whatever we want to kind of play in is what we can play in. And trickster is kind of an interesting one to play in. But here's what I've been thinking about it. Here's what I have come up with today. I took some notes and I just want to like talk about it a minute because I just kind of like was able to step above it more and like grasp it a little bit better. And so here's what I came up with. Trickster. The trickster is really intelligent, right? And this is, I think, what draws me to it. Because I really am, like, my Venus is in Libra, and that's an air sign, and that, has to do with communication and intellect and things like that. That means, like, the key to my heart is through intellect, really. So the trickster is really intelligent. And if you look at a trickster and like, why do we end up seeing that the trickster is intelligent, right? Because lots of archetypes are intelligent. But why do we know that the trickster is intelligent? Because they kind of show it off a little bit, with the wit and taking off guard a bit with the element of surprise. And why would they do that? And I believe it's because they're kind of bored. Like they're just got all this energy about analysis and knowledge and wisdom and curiosity. And it's like, what else would they do with that? Right? But to use it and play in it and kind of enrich their own reality and experience in life with it. So otherwise they would be very bored. So this boredom, I think, is why it starts like showing up, because it's like they kind of create the playfulness for themselves and the enjoyment in life. And I think there's a need to have the challenges. So the challenges are presented oftentimes to other people, right? Like, because the trickster is intelligent, they can recognize patterns, and they would see in other people the opportunity to trick them, to challenge them. And this serves as a workout for the mind that wants to devour and manipulate energy. And this is not a state of just being. It is analysis. And that means it's taking place in the fourth dimension. So the trickster is the fourth dimension archetype. And so it's kind of like the bridge. So if we looked at Hermes energy, Hermes is kind of like the trickster energy, right? And if you look at the mythology of Hermes, he's the messenger of the gods. Like, he is the only one who could go from up above to the underworld and back and forth and pass messages. And that's sort of what Loki can do too, right? Like, so let me see where I left off here. So this archetype can't just be present. And presence is love. And this trickster energy cannot just be, right? There would be immense amount of bored feelings, immense amount of unrest in a trickster energy that could not trick, that could not play. And so I was just noticing the distinction between love and trickster energy. So instead, chaos is created to play in. So chaos is that element of surprise, that non-conformity. And again, as I talk about this further, I'll reveal how I've seen that there's just a real duality to this, because while the chaos is being created, the chaos can also trap us. So it's like the element of surprise, but at the same time being contained in an illusion, like a prison. So fascinating, right? I love it. I mean, okay, so some people are uncomfortable in chaos. So here's the trickster. Trickster's playing around and creates chaos just by simply, like, let's use the trickster in the form of a human, right? A human utilizing the trickster energy might, like, say something unexpected, throw out a witty comment or another point of view, or just something that catches people's, like, off guard kindness. And since some people will be uncomfortable in that chaos that's been created because they really wanted it to be what they expected, you know, some people really revel in the chaos, and some people would kind of like the calm better. And some people can ride both. So in those that become very uncomfortable in that chaos, a potential or a fantasy will be created in order to cope with the chaos. So the person who needs to make sense of the chaos will draw from what their perception is and come up with a container for it, a story. So they will perceive whatever it is that they're looking at it from the lens of. So they will create a a story which is the calm that they need to contain the chaos that they're uncomfortable with. Now, because of this, let me just go on with my notes here. Instead of just observing the chaos, when pulled into and invested in a potential as a coping mechanism, a loop of that coping mechanism. So they've had to cope with the chaos that was created. And because they're coping, it will loop. Because it's not just presence, it's not just truth, it's not just love. It's now a coping mechanism to deal with something uncomfortable, right? And we know coping mechanisms loop. So they just become imprisoned. And it's equal to a trap. So this may or may not be apparent to the trickster, right? So some tricksters are going to notice this and intentionally use it in that way, knowing that some people will become uncomfortable and need to create a coping mechanism to deal with their chaos. And some tricksters may not even be concerned with that, may just literally be entertaining themselves with not much investment, or maybe even depending on how adept or how much into that trickster energy they are, they may not even be aware that people are doing that. Probably a majority of tricksters are aware that people do this, because I think that their intelligence is up there. I think that that's why they get bored, because they kind of see the bigger picture. So what I learned is that being okay with the unknown is the antidote to trickster energy. So if the trickster creates a chaos, and the chaos is where there's unknown, we don't know what's happening here. And if I'm okay with that unknown, meaning I can't predict this, and I'm okay with that. When I'm okay with that, now I'm not going to be susceptible to having to cope with trickster energy, and I won't sink down into the imprisoned state of trying to be comfortable and predicted within a chaotic state, right? Now chaos, this isn't part of my notes, but it's just come to me. Chaos is also the space of creation. So whenever a trickster is actually creating this chaos, people who don't go into coping could actually create something new. Interesting. They could be inspired to create something new based on the space that now offers limitless possibilities. So if I remain present in the way that I'm just aware that there's chaos right now, I'm aware that there are limitless possibilities right now, then I'm in the state of potential for creation, instead of in the state of being imprisoned by a reality that I need to create in order to cope with the chaos. So either way, there's this potential for creation. So what are you going to create? If you are uncomfortable with the unknown, you may fear it. And then what your creation is going to be fear-based. And that means that because you are in fear, because you need to feel like you can predict what is going to happen, you create your own prison. So for those tricksters who are aware of others' ways of navigating the chaos they create, trickster relies on presenting a potential that is more appealing than the reality, right? Or they can also exploit feelings or states being avoided. Like if they see a person as avoiding feeling guilt, then the chaos they create targets in on the guilt that person could potentially feel. And then they know that they will step into their coping mechanism that helps them avoid feeling guilt, whatever that may be. Running away, drinking, or whatever story they tell themselves. Now, just so you know, I'm not saying this because I know this because I've been doing this. As I said in the beginning, I avoided trickster energy. I thought it would be, make me a bad person to do it. This is literally all from just my experience of being on the receiving end of tricksters, that I have now studied it enough to realize the patterns and understand what's happening. That's how I know this. Okay. Now they can either poke in on the state being avoided by a person, like notice that person avoids guilt, so they make them like have to cope with guilt, or offering an alternative with the chaos they create. They say, oh, well, you don't have to feel guilty if you just believe this, right? So now this person is in even bigger illusion, even a step away from the original coping mechanism. So the trickster is so clever to be able to orchestrate this. It's like a chess player. They're a few moves ahead. Whereas freedom is in presence. So they're actually creating the labyrinth. Okay? The confusion comes in when there is this discrepancy between reality and potential. So now, in order to deal with the chaos, the person who was uncomfortable is living in a potential. The idea of something being a certain way. Not the way it really is, because the way it really is actually chaos. It's not defined, not definable. It's unwritten. But because they've needed to define it because of fear, now they are living in a discrepancy between reality and potential. And that will always cause confusion in the human mind. And that the chaos of that state of being living in this state of potential versus reality with a difference between them, that lends to the illusion, right? Because you're so far removed from the truth now. You're caught in the labyrinth. And the labyrinth is what? A trap, a prison. Okay, so here's the thing. We can only be lied to or tricked when we want to believe the lie. If we want to believe what's being shown to us as this illusion or this potential, then we will. So you have to look at the reasons why you might want it. And that's what the trickster's already done. They probably did it 2 steps ago. So finding out what people want allows the trickster to enact the whole chaos experience or trap. We can only be lied to when we want to believe the lie. That is because of expectations and attachment to outcome. So if you have watched other videos of mine, you know that expectations and attachment to outcome are 2 things that I say that we eliminate from our relating patterns in order to be fair relating. So that we can relate in a fair manner. We stop expecting of people to be different than they are. We stop needing them to answer to what we expect or want. We just let them be as they are. We stop trying to control and manipulate, and we let someone be as they are. And if that was the case, if we were doing that, we wouldn't fall into this trickster stuff. This trickster stuff thrives on the old paradigm. In this way, anyway. I'm sure, now while I'm saying all this, and I'm going to continue saying more about it, and how it's been playing out, but to me, just so you know, the trickster is also an alchemist, so I know that there's a higher version of trickster, and maybe I haven't met that version yet, or maybe I'm becoming a version of that through this study and mastery of the trickster energy that I've been participating in recent years. Okay. So the truth can prevail when we allow for possibility and step back to observe what is instead of being invested in potential or seeing something that is not there. Right? If we wanted to see it the way we wanted it, then we're easy to trick. Sometimes just the hope of something for the future, delaying the desired outcome, but keeping it as a potential, can be a way to trick someone, right? So this trickster doesn't even need to really follow through with the reality that was presented as a potential. They just have to make sure you hope for it. They just have to present the potential that it could happen. And that means that the outcome can be prolonged and put into the future inevitably, as long as you're willing to hope for it. So this is why hope can be a trap. And you know, if you've been watching my channel, that I have a video a while back now, how hope can trap us. I'm trying to think of what it was called. Elpis. Something about Elpis. Okay. Now, I looked at this in terms of the attachment styles that humans have. And an obvious place that this trickster energy likes to be played out is in the avoidant attachment style. So you can look into attachment styles if you're not familiar. Heidi Priebst, P-R, could be I-E-B-S-E or E-I-B-S-E. She has a great channel talking about attachment styles. So if you wanted to look into it, that might be a good resource for you. But the avoidant attachment is basically that attachment style where attachment is avoided. But what usually happens is these are the people that get labeled as the narcissist because people get tricked by the illusion that they utilize in order to get their needs met. So these are the people who can often like make you think that they want to be in a relationship with you and then get what they want and run away and move on to the next one, right? These are the people who avoid you getting too close. And that is simply as a result of how they formed their attachment style as children, as infants, really. So in my life, the way I've been experiencing some of this is I wanted more than anything to be loved by someone who didn't even love themselves. And this is like stemming from my childhood. I had a father who was avoidant. So he had a great capacity for feelings and love, but he had also suffered a lot of abuse and hadn't been, in a position where he could feel trusting that his connections were there with his caretakers at a young age. And at some point, surely his love was rejected, at least in a moment, something that would have caused trauma. So because I had a father like that, this, imprinted onto me. When we are born as humans, we get programmed for the environment that we're brought into. So just by virtue of being brought into the household where he lived as my father, I was also imprinted with this energy. And my experience of this energy was, I want my dad's love, but he cannot connect with me on that level. He keeps avoiding it. He keeps escaping into drugs or whatever. So because I wanted this from my dad and it had never gotten resolved, I continued into adulthood wanting this. And I would often find myself attracted to men who were also avoidant. Because we will grow up and will sort of like recreate the experience that we need in order to heal the wound that we got. So my being attracted to men who were like my father in that way recreate the experience of me being rejected. And why would that be? That's because I would be presented with an opportunity to heal, right? Okay. I wanted it to turn all around, right? Like, before I could realize that it was an opportunity to heal, all I did was want that to be different. I just wanted that man to realize that I was lovable. You know what I mean? All because I was still stuck in that state of wanting that from my dad. So the longing and hunger for connection with a person whose energy was also avoidant was looping in me. And I needed to be present with those feelings in me, right, in order to neutralize them. Meanwhile, on the other side of the avoidant person, avoidant person, right, so this would be the men that I was attracted to. So they long for a connection too, but they don't trust it. So they play by keeping the illusion of its potential, not just for the other, but also for themselves. It's more comfortable for them to play in the fantasy of it possibly being true than to allow the truth of it. So the illusion that they create is not only for the purpose of keeping the other's interest in the chaos and the potential, it's also their own. They've also created that fantasy space for their own longing for connection to be, because it's safely placed in this detached fantasy rather than engaging in what they don't trust, which is that the other person is actually going to be loving. Instead, they create the fantasy that there is a loving relationship, and they utilize that to live in. The illusion serves both parties' wounds. Even when presented with genuine reciprocal love, the avoidant is looping in the avoidance of feelings of being rejected by it originally. Right? So this is the child who wanted connection from their mother, but maybe the mother was suffering from weird. I just lost the word that I was looking for. The depression that happens to mothers after they give birth. Postpartum depression. Or maybe the mother was traumatized from her own childhood, right? The mother could not show up and be present and offer a reciprocal connection to likely the infant and maybe the child, maybe the toddler. At whatever age it was, this avoidant person's connection was rejected. And in order to cope with that, the feeling of that, which was a very painful feeling, they decide that this is not something to be trusted, that they cannot trust that connection is real and that it will be reciprocated. And that is the loop that's repeating in their energy. The loop that says, I cannot trust this love because it's going to hurt me. It's going to reject me. So even when presented with the genuine reciprocal love, the avoidant is looping in the avoidance of feelings of being rejected by it originally, when the attachment style was established. Meaning they need to be present with the pain of having their love and connection rejected. That may include feeling ashamed for not being lovable or not good enough to be loved. Right? So they have to realize what it feels like to feel ashamed of not being lovable, because that's the childlike perception of someone who's trying to interpret why they might have been rejected by their own mother's connection, because they don't think, oh, my mom is just sick, right? Because they're actually just trying to get their needs met. And so being present, like, so acknowledging, validating why it's there, accepting that it's there, and being present with the feeling of that shame or that hurt about not feeling lovable is what's needed. When coping, the avoidant can even lash out and try to hurt others in order to assure a boundary between them and the other. So if they're not able to be present with these feelings, they will do whatever they have to do to make sure you don't get close, because they don't trust you. They don't trust connection. So if they do feel like they're softening towards it, that's definitely when they're going to lash out and hurt you, because they want to know that there's a boundary and that they feel safe. They would rather live in their fantasy than the potential for the reality of you hurting them, potentially. Okay. They absolutely do not trust the other and will not trust the other. They will not. That fantasy is way more appealing than the real love that you offer. And they will not trust it until they have earned their own trust back by being present with their own avoided painful feelings. So if they were to become the one who could love their own self and have their own back and take the role of the mother that they needed for themselves, they can, over time, earn back their own trust that they're going to be taking care of themselves, that they do love themselves, that they're worthy of love. How will they know they're worthy of love? Because they loved themselves. That's how they'll know they're worthy of love. And they'll understand that other people who have loved themselves too are capable of love, and it is trustworthy. They can only trust another after they have learned they can trust themselves to love themselves. Then they understand what it takes and will switch to being discerning instead of avoidant. This is a maturation of the version of self that was originally wounded by having their connection rejected. So it's actually like reparenting and maturing that hurt child version of self who designed the coping mechanism that they've been living in and looping in, which is a potential, which is a trap. Okay. So one person is avoiding feeling their longing for love, right? That would have been me. I didn't want to feel that I longed for that love. I just kept trying to get the love. Just kept hoping it would be different. What can I do? What can I do to prove to you? Oh, you don't trust me? Well, look how trustworthy I am. It's like, that's never going to work, right? I could do that for 10 years, dancing around trying to show how transparent and trustworthy I am, and they will never, ever trust me, because it's not about me. It's about their own coping mechanism that they're seeing life through the lens of. And no matter what, if they're seeing life through the lens of not trusting others, I can be the most trustworthy person and they will not see me that way, right? So one person is avoiding their feeling of longing for love, and the other is avoiding feeling unlovable. And both may be avoiding to feel both things as well, right? So I could be avoiding the feeling of being unlovable, and they could be avoiding the feeling of longing for love. But I think it normally would show up as the person who's longing for that connection avoiding feeling that longing fully, instead just trying to jump through hoops to fulfill it, instead of actually just being present with it. Present with it means I'm not trying to change it, right? That's a key thing. So the person who's avoiding feeling unlovable, they have to sit with and accept that they may be unlovable. And it has to be okay. And they have to then love themselves anyway. It's like a little mind fuck in a way. But that's what the trickster is. Okay, on top of it all, these avoided feelings filter the view and make it all seem real. But in fact, it's all an illusion. Because both parties are lovable and are love. So, if they really needed these things, then they would have died without them. Right? Longing for love and feeling unlovable are tricks of a lie we live and suffer from. Because I can never not be love. I am love. And if I'm love, then and I love love, then I'm lovable, you know? It's like all of this is illusions that have been created by stories we tell. All because we are trying to avoid feeling a painful feeling. And the painful feeling is a lack of connection with someone that we wanted to be connected to. And then either deciding that we really need to try hard to get it, or deciding that it's not worth having because it's not trustworthy. Those are the two things that have happened in this scenario that we're talking about here. So this keeps both parties longing for connection instead of being connected. Right? Because drop the story, drop what happened in the past, and just be. And it's like, if I can just be with you and look in your eyes, now I'm connected. That's it. There's layers and different ways to connect with people. Both parties need a safe container to heal in. So we're not going to just drop the stories and forget what happened in the past and look in each other's eyes and feel connected. That's never going to happen because we require safety and a comfort zone in order to heal in. Healing happens in comfort zones. So while actively playing out the loops, there's just coping going on, which leaves no room to be comfortable and heal because the wound is actively being avoided while the loop plays out. Right? I can be longing for the love of somebody who's avoidant. And that person can even love bomb me and indulge me into an act that makes me think that they are loving me. And I will still be looking at through the lens of longing for love. So I will still perceive that it's not good enough. So this person, in actuality, even if they didn't run away, even if they did look me straight in the face and proclaim their love, if I have my wound of longing for love, I will be looking at them through the lens of longing for love, and I will perceive that I'm still longing for love, and whatever they do will not be good enough. Just like if I stood in the face of someone who is avoidant, and I told them everything about me, and I proclaimed that I was trustworthy, and I invited them to look at my phone and look at my life and talk to all my friends and watch me for a while, they still would not feel that I was trustworthy. Even if I had never shown myself to be not trustworthy, they are looking through the lens of the wound that says, I cannot trust this. So they will always see me through the lens of not trusting me, no matter what I do. So these wounds have to be resolved within our own selves, right? And we have to do that within a safe container for ourselves. When we're actively doing that, like if I'm trying to get somebody to love me, I am not going to be in a safe comfort zone because I'm going to be in that coping, that place where I'm having to cope with avoiding a pain. Okay, so there's no room to be comfortable and heal because the wound is actively being avoided while the loop plays out. And we know that the way to heal is to be present with the feelings. And where's that going to happen? In the comfortable place. So away from people, in your bed, in a walk in the woods, nobody's around, you know. As long as you're safe to do that, to feel your feelings without harming yourself or another. So that's an important skill to have in order to do this. So awareness of the wound and a desire to heal is required by both, and then a safe space to be present with the feelings is required, right? So we could be aware that these patterns exist. We could read a book of psychology and know and understand how this dynamic is working. But that knowing about it doesn't heal it. It literally has to be that we know about it, and then we desire to heal it. We want to put effort towards healing ourselves. We don't change that other person. We're not like going to the avoidance saying, I know what you need to do to heal. No, we're looking at our own wound and we're healing our own wound. That's all we can do. We have no control of other people. Remember, we can't expect of them, and we can't be attached to the outcome. And once we heal our own wound, right? So now I've taken time to be present with my wound of longing for the love of someone who couldn't give it to me, right? I'm present with that wound. Now, when I see someone who's avoidant, guess what? They can be that way. I understand, and it's okay, because I don't need them to be different than they are. That's where they're at. What, I'm going to snap my fingers and expect them to be something else because I need something from them? No, I don't need anything from them now because I have given myself what I needed. And so for the other party, if they wanted to heal, they get into their safe space and they are present with their feelings of being unlovable. And now they start to trust themselves to be discerning enough to decide whether somebody is worth trusting or not, or worth building trust. I saw a video by Brené Brown about the anatomy of trust. Amazing video. I loved it because if you don't know her, she's a researcher who researches these aspects of connection, human connection and relationships. And she talks about when it comes to trust isn't like a leap of faith thing. You don't just like, oh, I guess I'll take a risk and trust you. No. Trust is something that's built up over time and experiences with somebody. Right? The trust that we have is in our own ability to discern and have experiences with another person. But it doesn't mean that we have to fully go all in and expose ourselves vulnerably to every person, because not every person can handle that. Not every person is going to treat us well in the face of that. We know that from our own experiences in the past, that some people will take advantage of that. Some people might not be in a healed state, and they might see your weakness, and they might try to do a trick on it, right? And might try to entrap you, or invite you into a potential and a fantasy to live in. And they might even do it unconsciously. They might not even realize that that's what they're doing with you. But then you're both stuck in a fantasy, which is a trap and a prison. And until someone heals, that will continue. And you'll probably keep hating each other for it. Because remember, I talked about that lashing out to create a boundary. That will probably keep happening like a cycle. So that's when you see those relationships that break apart and come back together, break apart, come back together. It's these attachment issues, and it has to be healed within the self, right? And building trust with another happens after you've trusted yourself to handle yourself. Then you know what it takes. Then you know, oh, over time I proved to myself that I can handle and I have my own back. I proved to myself that I can be present with whatever I'm going through, that I can look for a solution when I face a challenge. I've proven to myself that I am trustworthy, that time and time again that I will show up for myself. If you've been abandoning yourself for years, it only makes sense that it will take time to build that trust within yourself again. And when you've done it with yourself, you'll be open to doing that with someone else. And it's the same process over time. You know, this person shows up for me, or this person seems to actually consider me. This person seems to care. And over a long period of time, that may equal trust. right? Now, the wounded version of ourselves might go, well, someone can keep up that fantasy and that illusion for a long period of time. Yes, I know. I know. But because you've played in the illusion before, and because you've earned your own trust back, now you have the added advantage of discernment. And because you've met yourself on a much deeper level than you were able to when you were living in fantasy. Fantasy is very shallow. You're not dealing with the inner world. To heal, you go inner. And now, when you have access to inner, you can see their inner too. So now when you're discerning, you're actually discerning on a much deeper level than a trickster is playing on. So you cannot be deceived after you have gone through this process. You've played in that dynamic, you understood it, then you went deep in. Now, when that dynamic shows up again, you see it's very shallow. It's like, oh, this person does seem like they're showing up for me, but not in this instance, and they didn't seem to have anything going on, and they dropped me as soon as I didn't have anything to offer them, or it's very shallow. They don't seem to really like understand what I'm going through or care about that. They seem to be doing it in a performative way, right? You just see when it's just on the surface. Because you've gone deep into your own self, you can see when someone else isn't coming from that place. So trusting self, building self-trust takes time, and so doesn't building trust with others. And because we've healed from those experiences, we have the added bonus of discernment. And that means that even when someone presents the facade or the fantasy or the potential of being trustworthy, that we know whether there are roots to that, you know? It's like the difference of looking at a plant, a potted plant, and a cut flower. If someone only is ever giving you cut flowers, you notice that there's no roots here. This has been cut. There's just the pretty part. There's nothing propping it up. And you know that because you've met yourself in the places that prop things up. So you can see deeply into others when you've seen deeply into yourself. So here's what I've learned about trickster energy, and I am fascinated by it, like I said, and I'm going to continue to be open to understanding and learning about it as I'm guided to. This experience for me, my attachment style is actually anxious. So I have a bit of avoidant and a bit of cling. I do both. So if not guided by spirit to keep engaging with this, like those relationships that I was in, oftentimes when I had an attraction to an avoidant man, spirit would actually, through my oracle, I would feel that confusion and I would go to my oracle for answers, and spirit would encourage me to engage with it more. And for a while, that fed my fantasy and said, oh yeah, this is okay, I can trust this. But eventually I had to catch on to, yeah, this isn't trustworthy. And then eventually I got the idea that, oh, spirit is actually having me engage in this process of studying this on a deeper level so that I can master it and I can understand it. And so if spirit were to continue to guide me into this kind of experience, and because there was more to learn, that's what I would do. Because ultimately, like, I do trust my inner knowing, my guidance, my urge, my curiosity. And I'm fascinated by the whole process of unfolding it. And I think that there is potential to overcome anything. I think there's a solution for all of the challenges we face. So when I started out this journey and I was so codependent and I just wanted to be loved, I would have hoped that it was a quick fix and that it would, but it's okay that it wasn't, because this path that I've taken in order to get all the understandings that I've gotten and to heal all the layers that I've healed and to understand myself on a deeper level, which involved taking apart my coping mechanisms, deconstructing my defense mechanisms to reveal who I really am. I mean, that is way better than a quick fix. That's solid. You know, getting down to my roots is knowing myself, and is knowing that I'm not lacking, is knowing that is just a game we play. And it was very real while I was in it. But now look at my smile after coming out the other side of it. I think for me at this stage right now in my life, I think there's definitely more work for me to do in the longing, in the being present with longing, right? Because I've been single for more than 3 years now. And you could say that I slipped into that avoidant state. But I was also anxious about it a lot of times too, like wanting it, but not knowing how to get it because I couldn't trust it. So there's this both thing going on, right? And also just finding myself attracted to people who were avoidant. So it could never come to fruition anyway, because I was only focused on someone who was never going to trust it. So I feel like at this stage that I'm in now, like, I love the realizations of it, but there is more for me to do with being present with those longing feelings now that I've realized all this. And I literally just realized this like an hour before I recorded. I was about to, like, I realized it and I was about to sit down and record, and then I got a phone call. So it was kind of like taking me off the track of like presenting this information, which I just feel strongly that I want to. So actually I feel in my gut right now that there's more to process and be present with. That's how I know. That's how I know, because as I try to close this up, that feeling comes into my being, and my body tells me, hey, there's more here. Can you be with your longing some more? Can you love and be present with the part of you that feels like she wants her daddy's love, or she wants her mom's love, or that she just wants to feel like she's good enough for someone to love? And it's like, yeah, I would really like to be with that part of me. I would really like to honor the part of me that had that misunderstanding about me. Because I am lovable, and I am worthy of love, and my parents loved me the way that they could, you know? Because I understand the patterns that my family line has been in. I understand what created them. I understand what we're trying to avoid. And I understand why they couldn't give me the presence that I would have wanted, but apparently didn't actually need, since I survived without it. And can now find myself in a position to give it to myself. Which these two people, like me, the avoidant attachment, and the anxious attachment, and also the avoidant attachment, these are two attachment styles that end up being very independent people. They don't count on other people because they don't trust them. So I feel like these two types have such a good opportunity to heal themselves if anyone does. Because we are willing to take up effort on our own behalf. Because we have learned to be independent and to not count on others. So we will take responsibility for ourselves. So these two types have real potential and all the ingredients needed in order to walk through the process of releasing themselves from these type coping mechanisms, wounding patterns, and prisons of potential and fantasy. I've thought about doing a video where I just sit and be present with feelings. So let me know if that's something that appeals to you. Like, would it would it be beneficial to you if you had someone like me, or in this case, me, on a video, like being present, bringing up the feeling, and then being present with it, with you at the same time, right? Like, would it help? Would it feel like you were having your hand held, and would that be appropriate and safe, and would that be a comfort zone for you? Because I think sometimes that could be looked at like enabling, because if you're not willing to be present with it and you're not sovereign, then are you really going to solve it? But I think even in those cases, a lot of things can be solved that way. And yeah, I just wonder how others would feel about that. What do you think it would be beneficial to you to have someone like me or me on a video being present with certain emotions that you've been avoiding to feel? Like feeling unlovable. Like, can we be present with the feeling of being unlovable? So it's not pushing it away. I mean, it gives immediate relief to just allow that feeling of being unlovable. And it, in a way, like I can feel like wildness in me behind it. That, like, just, it's like, yeah. Yeah, sometimes I'm unlovable. Sometimes I've not loved myself. That's how I know sometimes I'm unlovable. Right? And then what's this little twist when we actually love ourselves through the feeling of being unlovable? What's that? It's like this love of being wild and free. It's this love of the unknown. So can you feel how powerful this is? Let me know. I'm gonna end this here, and I really enjoyed it. Thanks for participating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. So if you care to share, please do.